And I read on your blog, you spoke about this sort of beautiful analogy that your friend spoke to you about, and it said, you imagine a teacup with a message at the bottom, and the more you pour tea into the cup, the longer you can't see the message at the bottom. And the tea represents the stimulation, and we are all teacups with never-ending supply of tea. So how did your trip to Nepal, and especially your 10-day silent retreat of Vipassana, I hope I said that correctly, help you become your true self again?
Yeah, thank you so much for, I actually forgot that I wrote that, and it's a good topic to talk about coming off the topic of social media, because, you know, when we talk about stimulation, so much stimulation comes from our phones. So that was a really interesting trip for me. I took on the challenge to do a 10-day silent meditation retreat because I had been craving this kind of silence and simplicity. And funnily enough, this happened all just before COVID.
Hi, and welcome to the Tribes for Good podcast. We are a high-impact platform that helps individuals take action on social and environmental causes that they care about. In each episode, we chat to new guests who are entrepreneurs, leaders, and professors who will be sharing their social impact journey with us. You can follow us on social media at Tribes for Good and listen to the stories of change that will inspire you to join us in creating a better world. We hope you enjoy these chats as much as we do. Today we have with us Bianca from the Altruistic Traveller, and this is a bit of a fangirl moment for me personally because I've been following you for about 2 years on Instagram, and when I was living in Asia, specifically Vietnam, I used your blog as a source of information for a lot of my sort of travels and my shopping and that sort of thing. And I actually bought a moon bag, which I still use to this day, from Chi Designs in Hanoi. So yeah, welcome to the Tribes for Good podcast.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here and to finally meet you.
Yes.
Really looking forward to chatting today.
And another thing is that I actually connected with Tribes for Good through your, it was either your Instagram or an article you wrote online about them. So yeah, and I'm still with them a year later. So it's great.
Amazing.
So as I mentioned, you are the owner of the Altruistic Traveller. Can you tell us more about you, what you do, and how you got there?
Sure. Well, the Altruistic Traveller was an idea that started for me about 5 years ago when I wanted to combine two passions of mine, one which was travel and the other which was giving back, also known as altruism. And I guess for those who don't know, altruism really, what it means is to be selfless. And I learned this term after watching a TED talk about effective altruism from an Australian philosopher, actually. So that's the story behind the name. And then I really wanted to kind of spend a significant amount of time overseas writing about the relationship between tourism and impact. And at that time, responsible travel was quite new. The idea of sustainable tourism wasn't really what it is today. And so I was able to really just take on that journey, go to different countries throughout Asia, work with local communities and local organizations that were using tourism as a force for good. And it was actually, I even was so surprised and inspired by the people that I would meet on that journey, and the grassroots organizations and the grassroots movements that were being created in the responsible tourism space.
That's amazing. Yeah, I've definitely experienced, especially in Asia, a lot of different social enterprises within the sort of travel industry, but also on the outside, not in the travel industry, but you can still do it whilst you're traveling. And they've really given me a new perspective of the country, especially Vietnam, where I was living there. And, you know, the locals were so lovely and so welcoming. And it was just so nice to get sort of experience their life, their way of living. On your blog, you mentioned that the turning point in your travels was in India, and that is where Tribes for Good is based. And you were one of the first people to join our social impact journey. Can you tell us a little bit more about that experience?
Sure, yeah, it's interesting actually. When I spoke about India in my blog, and the turning point for me was not the time that I went to do the volunteering with Tribes for Good. It was actually a couple of trips before that where I was really exposed to, I guess, my first vision of what inequality looks like, and really started to understand that the world that I had grown up in and the world that I had seen around me every single day is not necessarily the world that other people see. And it was very eye-opening for me. And so I had returned to India one time after that experience. And then the third time was when I was accepted into the social impact journey with Tribes for Good, which was such an inspiration for me. And I was so honored to be able to join that experience with a bunch of change makers, learn about social impact from Mandeep's world of knowledge in the space, and also see India from a different perspective as well. I'd never been to Mumbai, and I had never really been so involved in understanding what some of these social enterprises had done. And the name isn't coming to me at the moment, the women that
Aftertaste.
Aftertaste, that's right. To be able to kind of sit with them and understand their model, and then have the opportunity to bring my skills in. I think, you know, skill sharing is this really I guess not underrated, but underutilized opportunity for people in this space. And so to have the opportunity to come in, bring some of my skills, share the skills that I have, and match them with the skills that the organization needed, it was such a great experience.
Yeah, I was quite sad when I went to India at the end of last year. I didn't get a chance to do the social impact journey because like the timing just didn't really align. But I did get to go into Dharavi, and we did like a workshop with one of the young change makers from Tribes for Good, with the guides from Be the Local Guide, where they take foreigners through Dharavi. For those that don't know, it's one of the biggest slums in Mumbai. And the change maker that did the workshop, Vivek, he was brilliant. And it was just like, it was such a nice experience. And unfortunately, I didn't get to go see Aftertaste, which I really would have liked to have done, but there's always the future for that. So through your travels, you volunteered with many different organizations in many different countries around the world, and raised funds for a lot of causes. I'm sure with all the people you've met, there are many causes that you would want to raise funds for. So which ones are the ones that are closest to your heart, and why?
Oh, it's a very good question, because impact is so diverse, and actually who have done a great job at organizing impact for us are the Sustainable Development Goals, because you can really break them down into the type of impact that you want to create. For me, I usually feel that maybe I'm drawn to a country and then drawn to their causes. It's never been one specific cause or industry that I feel more passionate about. I have done a lot of work with gender equality. I worked with a women's project in Nepal for quite a significant amount of time, but it was because I had gone to Nepal and because I had connected with these women. And I think it comes down to the connection that you make with these people. I mean, some people, I think, you know, maybe just incredibly passionate about climate change, or incredibly passionate about sustainability, and that's wonderful. You know, it doesn't really matter if you're passionate about one thing or you're passionate about many. But for me, I think it was really around the connections that I made, the places that I wanted to go. And what was really heartwarming was that no matter where I decided to go, there were causes that I could get involved with. And sometimes if they might not have been quite obvious to me, if I had a look a little bit harder, like maybe gone and ate at a social enterprise and started having a chat with the manager there, or doing a little Google search. And back then I was working with a great platform called Grassroots Volunteering, and they started a database of social enterprises around. So sometimes I'd just jump onto that website. I think at the time there was also visit.org, a few of these pioneering platforms. Now we've got I Like Local, and a couple of others as well. I think Airbnb Experiences is also tapping into social impact now. So it's growing now, but I think for me, it was really around where I want to go, connecting with somebody there, making that connection, and then feeling like, okay, how can I bring something to this? How can I bring my skills? How can I bring my knowledge and either contribute in some way or share their story or just learn from them as much as they learn from me.
Yeah, you mentioned having a connection with a country, and I personally feel that way about South Africa. Maybe I'm biased because I was born here and I've grown up here, and I absolutely love South Africa, even though it does have its issues. And I feel that way about a few other countries in Southern Africa, for example, like Zambia. I was lucky enough to go there in January and I absolutely loved it. And I've also been to Mozambique, which is a beautiful country with absolutely lovely people. Out of curiosity, do you feel that way about Australia at all?
That's a good question. I mean, Sydney in Australia, yeah, I was born here, but the concept of home to me has really changed since I traveled, because while I suppose it comes down to, and I've thought about this a lot as well, around where you identify with as your home. And for many people that don't travel will always identify with their birthplace as their home, but sometimes people may not feel that their birthplace at that any given time is their home. And I can tell you that, you know, I've woken up in the remote regions of Nepal and felt as though that was my home. I've been in Bali and felt as though that was my home. And so for me, it's around where I feel whole. And I know I don't want to say sort of home is where the heart is, but what home means and where you feel you can be the best version of yourself can be anywhere. Sometimes I am the best version of myself in Australia, and I love Sydney a lot. It's given me so much. A lot of the people that I love are from here, but as I've moved around and as I've loved other places, and a lot of the people that I love are also dispersed in other places around the world, and I've also been able to be much better versions of myself in other places where I felt more inspired for whatever reason. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like, you know, Australia is a beautiful country, and we're very privileged, not to say that we don't have our own societal issues and environmental issues to work through. But for me, I do feel like when I am in these other countries that I'm quite passionate to kind of get in there and do the work and connect with people.
Yeah, I've been to Australia twice, and just compared to the other countries I've been to, it is obviously a lot more developed. So I guess that definitely does make a difference. And how do you go about selecting the organizations that you really want to support? Like, is there a certain criteria that you would like them to sort of check off?
Yeah, it's I appreciate transparency always. I think you can. I mean, taking a step back, I also do believe that we are often connected to things energetically, and so sometimes I feel that
if you
maybe
have a
there
burning
is
desire
another
to make a
reason
difference
why
but
I'm
aren't sure
drawn
how,
to
join our
something
Young
or some
Changemakers
certain
program.
organization.
This
But
part-time
if I
virtual
was to give
program
advice
introduces
about what
participants to
types
the
of
basics of
organizations
running a
that
social
one might
enterprise,
want to look
sustainability,
to
social
support, I
impact,
really
and
feel that
innovation, through
transparency
group
is quite
discussions,
important, and I think you
expert-led
can
workshops,
tell
and learn by
through
doing modules.
through
Join us in
websites,
solving
through
real
social
issues
media,
and
through
creating a
other
better
people's
world.
experiences, doing a bit of research. And then the cause, what I feel I could bring. For example, I don't have a medical experience, so I wouldn't put myself in a position where I needed to give any medical advice or go and work for Medicines on Frontiers, even though I absolutely love everything that they do. And in another life, maybe I will be a nurse working somewhere helping people in need, because that industry I'm just so grateful for. But I think it's a number of factors, including where I feel I could be most useful, the transparency of the organization, and just what feels right at the time.
Yeah. And obviously by supporting an organization, it's not always in monetary donations, but I did see recently that you are running the equivalent of getting to Everest Base Camp, or you were going to do it. I know you posted about it in September. So obviously you've been raising funds for quite some time now. Do you know the cumulative amount?
It would be so hard to say. I've always believed that it's important to spend a certain percentage each year to donate to a cause or to donate to an organization, especially because I can, you know, and because I'm a minimalist as well. I don't really believe in excess, and I think that sometimes, you know, it's important to step in where you can. The fundraiser was for an amazing organization called Planetera, who work in responsible travel. They're associated with G Adventures and kind of help local communities. And tourism has been absolutely immensely impacted by the pandemic. A lot of smaller communities have lost their main source of income, and so Planetera came in and they actually doubled their fundraising goal. And I think fundraising is really difficult. I've always found it hard, and I actually interviewed somebody yesterday from my podcast who is the co-founder of Start Some Good, which is a crowdfunding platform. And we had a great conversation about that. Their crowdfunding platform actually adds another level where they start to educate the organizations and the social causes around, okay, well, it's not only put the fundraiser out there, it's really, there is a whole psychology behind it. And he agreed it is difficult to raise funds, but as you mentioned before, there are other ways to give back aside from time and money, and money goes a really long way. So to go back to your question, I wouldn't be able to tell you, because sometimes I'll see something, you know, $20 here, $20 there. I think what Planetera did by making it fun and making it a challenge is always a great idea, because it kind of gets people involved. And to be honest, I wanted to see if I could walk the 65 kilometers in 1 week. Which was the equivalent to Everest. It actually was quite difficult because, you know, you have to consider things like work and weather and things like that. But it was just really nice to be outside, especially during this time.
Yeah, during 2020, when everyone has been, well, most people have been impacted really severely economically, fundraising has just become even more difficult than it was before. So I can only imagine.
I think so.
Yeah, I can only imagine how difficult this year has been for sort of responsible tourism companies that have completely lost their income due to the lack of travel, but now they're on top of that, they're trying to fundraise for those communities.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention as well, one thing that came out of my interview yesterday with Tom was the psychology around fundraising. And rather, if you are an organization or a cause or a person who wants to raise funds for something, he gave me this great advice, which was, don't think of it as you're asking for something, but think of it rather as you're offering somebody the chance to contribute. You're offering them the chance to support and be a part of somebody else's growth and somebody else's well-being. And so I thought that was just it's such a small piece of advice, but it really stood out to me from the interview. So
yeah, that's a really nice way of thinking about it. Even I was like, oh wow, that's so nice. Like, it made me better about sort of like, I know that my company that I've been working for in South Africa has also, they've got a foundation that they've been struggling with trying to raise funds. So I will definitely pass that information on.
Happy to help.
So I have been following you for quite some time now, and I have noticed that you often use social media for activism. Obviously, it is always great to create awareness about issues, and we've seen a lot of that in 2020 with so many different topics that have come up. But is social media activism enough? And do you have any advice on how we can use our online activism to contribute to our offline impact, especially in a year like 2020, and especially for like Gen Z and millennials who are digital activists?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and there's no doubt that there has been a bit of negativity around the whole idea of social media, people watching The Social Dilemma and things like that. But yes, I do believe that social media has always been such a great platform for activism, hence, why I've used it so much over the years. And I think that it's really tapping into the world to get behind you and to support something positive and support a brighter future. But I suppose the one thing that actually my friend Tiff runs a social media blog called The Social Story, and she said that it's great as a first step, but it should never be the final step. And years ago, I remember studying this and talking about the concept of slacktivism. And it came up again recently around, okay, well, something's happened, I'm going to post about it, and then that's it, I'm going to forget about it. And so I think we've seen it this year as well. Things come and campaigns come and campaigns go. But what's really important is to, yes, post about it, research about it though, and follow up with that. How can you make an impact? Be quite detailed in your posts, directing people to different organizations and things like that, and also allowing yourself in a non-judgmental space to kind of learn from what other people are posting. Like, I think with the challenge accepted post specifically, for people that don't know the black and white photo, I think those that kind of raised awareness about what the original issue was about, which was femicide in Turkey, never really wanted to make anyone else feel as if they were less because they didn't know that was the original reason. And so it's allowing yourself to, maybe say, oh, wow, I didn't really know this, and now I do, and now I can grow in that direction. And next time I'll be able to understand a little bit more around where these campaigns come from. Social media can be such an opinionated place as well, and that's what makes it so difficult, especially when you want to be an activist and you're so passionate about something. But I guess my advice would be just to remain objective, do research, and come at it in a way where you are where you are being an activist, but from a compassionate space.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up the Turkey femicide posts on social media. So I was actually listening to, funny enough, it's an Australian podcast that I listen to weekly, and they brought it up, and they said, there was a lot of sort of nastiness towards people who didn't know that it was about the Turkey femicides. But they made a really good point in saying that actually, by people doing this and not realizing, so many more people heard about the Turkey femicides and they learned something from it. So at the end of the day, a little bit of naivety turned out to be a good thing, and it showed everyone what was actually happening. And then I know in South Africa, we've got a very high femicide rate. It's one of the highest in the world. And then a lot of people also put in their captions, this is also about South Africa. It's not just about Turkey. So that was really nice to see as well. So like in that sense, social media was really good.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, is it going to go away anytime soon? Probably not. How can we use it in a positive way to come together, not to tear us apart?
Yeah, definitely. I think people have been on their phones so much during the lockdown, and they've sort of taken their anger out on people on social media, because it's so much easier to be sort of a bit bitter behind the screen than it is to be in person to someone's face. So they've sort of used it as an opportunity, but I think people are waking up to it, which is nice to see.
I think so. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, exactly. And I read on your blog, you spoke about the sort of beautiful analogy that your friend spoke to you about. And it said, you imagine a teacup with a message at the bottom. And the more you pour tea into the cup, the longer you can't see the message at the bottom. And the tea represents the stimulation, and we are all teacups with never-ending supply of tea. So how did your trip to Nepal, and especially your 10-day silent retreat of Vipassana, I hope I said that correctly, help you become your true self again?
Yeah, thank you so much for, I actually forgot that I wrote that, and it's a good topic to talk about coming off the topic of social media, because, you know, when we talk about stimulation, so much stimulation comes from our phone. So that was a really interesting trip for me. I took on the challenge to do a 10-day silent meditation retreat because I had been craving this kind of silence and simplicity. And funnily enough, this happened all just before COVID. And I think during these past 6 months, I've realized the importance of that silence and that time to just slow down and to slow the mind down. So that analogy is really about coming back to ourselves and recognizing how much noise there is around us, and how, you know, I was quite inspired by a lot of reading and research that I had been doing leading up to Vipassana about mindfulness and about the overstimulation that we often have to endure every single day. And so being in the 10-day silent meditation retreat, it was a very interesting story. I won't go into a lot of detail, but it's on my blog. Long story short, it was one of the most difficult experiences for me, because not so much being silent, that was the best part. Not having my phone, that was even better part. I think just because I had always been so used to being able to do something or go somewhere or just have this control over my life, and then being put in this position where you have to sit silent every single day and really just sit in that discomfort. It was very difficult for me, and it just reminded, although what I was asking of myself wasn't very hard at all. And so, you know, what I learned from that experience was just how much suffering is caused by our own aversion and our own sort of inability to slow down. And so since then, I've done a lot of research into mindfulness, and I'm actually looking to study it in the near future, just techniques about how we can just come into ourselves again, slow down, concentrate on our breath, and just realize the amount of stimulation and things around us that take us out of flow, take us out of peace. You know, I've actually, speaking of social media, I have for the past 3 weeks now had mindfulness Sundays where I do not use my phone, do not use my laptop, don't go on social media or anything like that, and to be present. I know, you know, we're present together right now. We are present sometimes when we're watching TV, or maybe when we're like having a great conversation with a friend, but to actively be present and to train yourself to say, no, I'm going to have this time to slow down. Neurologically, your brain will change, and you will find that you will be less, I suppose, at risk of reacting to things that maybe you don't need to react to. You'll be able to find a little bit more peace in your day-to-day life, and a little bit more of more acceptance. And by all means have I not mastered it yet, and I don't really think that there is a mastery of this. Every day is so different, and during these times when all of us are struggling so much, I think, you know, sometimes there is also a risk of what you call toxic positivity, to sort of say, oh, well, everything's fine, I'm just going to sit here and do my mindfulness, and not realize that there are things wrong. But the idea is, and I'm not sure if I'm quoting this, but to live life as it is and not as you would want it to be. So this beautiful kind of acceptance that comes with sitting in things as they are. And I am still on this journey, but I'm really looking forward to it. And it started many years ago, I think, on a trip to Nepal, but has gradually grown over the years in so many subtle ways. And I find myself here talking about it without realizing that that's how far I've come.
Yeah, I actually deleted Facebook off my phone, actually like near the beginning of the pandemic. And that has been really nice, actually. And I only got on it like maybe once every 2 weeks on my laptop. And I also deleted Instagram for 5 days recently. And it was just so nice I deleted it because I found that I was just picking up my phone without even realizing it, and automatically going onto Instagram without even realizing it. And I felt like it wasn't very healthy. And I was much more present when I didn't have it for those 5 days. I was reading like 2 hours a day, and it was just so nice. Yeah, I highly recommend a little bit of a detox, or like you said, like a mindful Sunday, or 1 day a week sort of thing. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like, do it for yourself. You know, you did that for yourself. You had the emotional awareness to say, this is not okay. You know, don't necessarily, for anyone listening, do it because we've said so. But if you feel distracted, if you feel like, you know, you're not listening to people, you're not stopping to smell the roses, you're not, you know, looking up sometimes, and just, yeah, recognize those times of disconnect and those times of, I suppose, what you would say, just when you're not concentrating or not paying attention, and then instead allow space for that attention to come back to you.
Yeah. And after 10 days of a silent retreat, what did it feel like to sort of re-enter the normal world again?
It was interesting. I was quite silent, actually. I didn't really want to have a lot of stimulation. One thing, though, I did sit in a cafe for 4 hours and wrote my whole experience, about 4,000 words, and it just came out of me. So if anyone who's listening wants to be a writer, I would suggest go to 6-day or 10-day silent retreat, come out, and then allow the words to just come out of you. It did. I felt clearer. I did.
That's really nice. And 2020 has been an extremely loud year, and I feel like my teacup has constantly just been overflowing with stimulation, which has been quite detrimental to my mental health. And I know you've also spoken about this or written about your struggles with mental health on Instagram. Do you have any advice on how people can better deal with their mental health?
Yes, thank you so much for bringing that up during this time. And I have in the past spoke quite openly about bouts of anxiety and depression that I had experienced throughout the years. And I think one analogy that I really like to use here is that if you as a being are like a river and you have water flowing through you, if all of a sudden a huge log of a tree falls into the river, it's going to start to build up, and it's going to start to build tension. Now, all of our lives are very different. You know, what builds tension for me might not build tension for you, but to, one, realize when the tension is there. Two, try and sort of sit with that and understand what is causing the tension. So there is a really beautiful meditation technique by a woman that I follow called Tara Brach, who's a meditation teacher and quite renowned. And the term is called rain meditation. So the idea is to recognize what is there, allow it to be there, because actually one of the things that causes a lot of suffering is, like I said, in Vipassana, aversion. So not wanting to really sit with this, what is happening to you. So allowing that, investigating what it actually is, you know, what is causing that river to to be blocked. And sometimes it might be something that you can't change straight away. It might be something that you can. It might be something that you might be able to start making very, very small changes, but achievable small changes. And then the last one is nurturing, and really just kind of, coming at the issue. I don't call it an issue, because we all go through this, and especially during this time, everybody is struggling for different reasons. But coming at a place of I think N is either nurturing or non-judgment, but both the same. Just come to the present moment without a judgmental view, and so for me, those 4 things, and not to say again I haven't mastered it. Some, this year has been tough for some, and for me, and a lot of nomads and travelers in the community. In a way, we've lost a bit of our identity, and for a lot of us, our number one value is freedom and freedom of movement. And to have that taken away, that is a big log falling in your river flow, I'll tell you what. But we're all going through these things, and to kind of realize that we're in this together, and connect with people or don't connect with people. Some people tend to become reclusive, and that's okay as well. Again, non-judgment. But no, honestly, my heart goes out to everyone at this time. 2020 has not been an easy year for many, many people.
Yeah, speaking about like small achievable goals and meditation, I recently started doing just 5 minutes of meditation when I wake up in the morning. And although it's just 5 minutes and it's really short, I really have noticed a difference in my days. And I especially notice it when I don't do it. Like, my days are always a little bit more chaotic when I don't do it. And when I do it, I tend to have like a more clear mind going forward with the whole day. And then I'd also say exercise has been a really good thing for me during this time, especially in South Africa. For the first 5 weeks of lockdown, you weren't even allowed to step outside for exercise. Like, you would be fined by the police if you were outside exercising. Wow. 5 weeks when you're not allowed to go outside. And in Cape Town, we've got these beautiful, gorgeous mountains that everyone loves to go and hike. And when all of a sudden that was taken away from us, it really, really affected people's mental health. And luckily, I come from a privileged background where I've got a garden, and we've got a swimming pool here. And luckily, the weather was still quite warm in March and April when we went into lockdown, and it was so nice to have that. But for a lot of people in South Africa, they don't have that, and for a lot of people around the world. So I can only imagine how tough it must have been for them during this time.
I know, never underestimate the feeling of the sun on your face.
Yeah, I'm so glad that South Africa and Australia is going into summer, because winters are that bad compared to like Europe. But still cold for us.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. So speaking of this whole pandemic, there's been a lot of talk, especially by, I know you mentioned G Adventures earlier, and I follow them, and they've been speaking a lot about, and Intrepid Travel have been speaking a lot about using this as an opportunity to change the way we travel. So as someone that is very invested in impact travel and responsible travel, what changes do you hope to see in the travel industry moving forward?
Sure, this is really a great sort of topic to talk on, because I have seen such more mention of sustainable tourism coming out, especially through, like you mentioned, people like G Adventures, people like Impact Travel Alliance. If anyone hasn't heard of them, they're a great sustainable tourism voice and platform. But I think that as potentially, so I was speaking to a woman the other day, and she said to me that this time has really made us realize what the things that we can actually live without. So I envision a more minimalistic style of traveling, probably more of a focus on sustainability, a focus on slow travel potentially, traveling locally, and also the idea of remote work has become very available to a lot more people than it had before. So maybe even this idea of slow travel people integrating into communities, and not so much, you know, as we go back to the topic of home, maybe this idea about moving and relocating may become more available to other people. But I really do have positive feelings about the future of travel. I think a lot of sustainable tourism organizations, or tourism organizations in general, that have been affected by this are using this time to plan for what 2021 looks like. And if you see the trends around sustainability, so whether or not that's using less plastic, or discussing climate change and carbon emissions and things like that, I feel that travel will follow suit. And as the conscious consumer rises, so will the conscious traveler. And I don't know, I call me an optimist, but I really do have good feelings about the future of travel when it's possible. I know that it's going to be an interesting transition, because there are even questions around the ethics of travel as we open up, you know. So is it okay to start moving around when there could be an opportunity to spread this disease in areas that it isn't? So it'll be really interesting. I certainly can't predict what that's going to look like, and there is a question around ethics, but I'm hoping that, say, in a post-COVID world, what travel would look like, I feel it would be a lot more sustainable, a lot more inclusive. There have been many conversations about inclusion in travel. So I also know of another organization in India that talks a lot about inclusion in travel, including inclusion for people with disabilities and things like that. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the ethics of traveling during this sort of period, because, I mean, if you look at Australia versus South Africa, I know I was actually meant to go to Australia in June and see my family there, and unfortunately that was cancelled. And I know Australia is only planning on opening up, I think, in the second half of 2021. But there are a lot of countries where tourism is one of the biggest employers, or the biggest forms of employment. And a lot of the economies, especially South Africa, can't really survive without it. And livelihoods are connected to the economy, unfortunately. And our governments don't have the funds, or they've lost the funds due to corruption or something along those lines, where they can't afford to sort of pay these people that have been severely affected. So I think it does definitely vary from country to country.
Yeah, and that's a really good that you brought that up, because it is the other side of the coin. Because there is so much economic struggle caused by lack of tourism. And so maybe we'll find ourselves in another one of those positions where it could be an us versus them. It could be, well, you're traveling and you're horrible. Or it could be, okay, let's really break this down and understand the intention of this person and what it means for local communities, what it means for them. We can be very opinionated as human beings. And I think, if anything, just to approach things in a more compassionate way, we're all experiencing this together. I think that's going to be the best way that we can move forward.
Yeah, and just one last question before we end off. What is your first trip that you would like to do after or post-COVID sort of thing?
Oh, that's such a good question. You know what? I think if I could, and I could just have a ticket to anywhere, I'd love to go and see my friends in the Maldives.
Oh, beautiful. I'd love to.
And I don't say that from a luxury travel perspective. I say that because I spent a lot of time there working with locals and a great company called Secret Paradise in Maldives. And I would just imagine myself to be on one of those beaches and just snorkeling in the beautiful coral. And oh yeah, that would be so nice.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you so much. It's so great talking to you.
Thanks for listening to the Tribes for Good podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on social media or through our website, www.tribesforgood.com.